Despite still being a very profitable picture, A New Beginning was unable to continue the financial momentum of the Friday the 13th franchise. On top of that, this time it was not just the standard film critics who had always been hard on the franchise voicing their displeasure with the latest film. Now even the hardcore fans felt alienated by what A New Beginning had to offer. With that, Frank Mancuso Jr. set out to find a new writer and director to lead the franchise. He would give them a large amount of creative freedom, but there was one directive that was absolutely non-negotiable. He didn't care how they did it, but Jason Voorhees had to be brought back as the killer. That's where Tom McLoughlin comes in. Originally coming to Hollywood from a comedic background and wanting to work in that genre, McLoughlin was still a fan of the horror genre. He caught the eye of Mancuso from his work on the film One Dark Night and agreed to do it because of the stature of the franchise and the creative freedom it offered. One of the first questions he had for Mancuso was, could he add comedy to Friday the 13th? Mancuso agreed to this request on one condition: Jason himself was not to be made fun of. With that, McLoughlin's vision for his installment of Friday the 13th began to take shape. The next decision McLoughlin made was to fully establish Jason as supernatural, making him a zombie and giving him a Frankenstein-style resurrection within a graveyard. This was fitting for the Gothic-style horror that McLoughlin loved. Another bold swing the movie would take was to give Camp Crystal Lake the most backstory since the original, as the town renamed it Camp Forest Green, trying to bury the ghost of the past with the name change. The film would also briefly see the camp get up and running, with children even arriving at the camp. And not only does this add to the more lighthearted nature of this film, but it also adds to the stakes as well. On top of all of that, McLoughlin made the decision to continue the story of Tommy Jarvis. John Shepard was initially contacted about returning to the role, but that never came to be. Tom Matthews was brought in to replace him. As for the ending of Part 5, that was completely ignored, as is pretty much all the events of Part 5. The movie does a good job of introducing a new version of the character, while still having some connective tissue to the Shepard version, as Tommy's scars from the events of the final chapter lead to the resurrection of Jason. So needless to say, Part 6 was the boldest swing the franchise was going to take to date. While fans certainly weren't crazy about the sleazy and grimy direction Part 5 took, Part 6, with its more comedic and blatantly supernatural approach, was just as much of a risk and could have fallen just as flat. While initially that seemed to happen, as the decades have come and gone, Jason Lives has become a beloved chapter of the franchise by the majority of fans, exactly because of the fresh, bold direction and swings it takes. With that, let's get into my thoughts on the film. Of course, we have to start with the riskiest and boldest choice the film made, attempting to add a genuinely comedic tone to a Friday the 13th movie. If this aspect of the film was bungled, then it could have sunk the entire film and permanently damaged the franchise. Luckily, in my view, this tonal shift is executed to absolute perfection. The more lighthearted, comedic, and even at times meta approach is a breath of fresh air. Despite seeing this movie several times, there is so much of it that is a blast to watch, puts a smile on my face, and even still gets quite a laugh out of me as well. There is a reason that Jason Lives gets labeled the Scream before Scream, and it's easy to see why Tom McLoughlin was seriously considered to direct Scream before the job ultimately went to Wes Craven. McLoughlin does such a masterful job weaving a self-referential tone similar to Scream in a Friday the 13th movie, without the movie turning into a full-blown horror comedy. The film winks at and has fun with the franchise and genre that it is a part of, without making fun of and disrespecting it. From the caretaker, to the counselors, to the kids, to the cops, to even some of the kills, there's so many fun moments and sequences here. I can't praise the fresh and balanced tone of this movie enough. Another thing I loved is the decision to make Jason a zombie. As I said in my Part 2 review, I've always really disliked the decision to have Jason survive the drowning of 1957. I found the whole explanation to be ridiculous. What I love about this film is that it embraces the supernatural in a way that I wish Part 2 had, with Jason being a zombie. It differentiates the character from Michael Myers while also giving him a cool look. The makeup effects in the cemetery to open the film are fantastic, and the look of Jason's decayed, zombified head in the hockey mask gives the character more of an edge. That leads us to C.J. Graham, who does a great job of capturing this Jason perfectly. This Jason feels calculated, strong, and methodical without feeling robotic. I also love how the film adds more mythology to the character without it feeling forced. Going off of that, I love the additional world building around the camp itself. The decision for the town to change its name to Camp Forest Green feels like a believable one to me, and I love the added touch of seeing the old Crystal Lake sign at the bottom of the lake near the end of the film. To see the camp briefly open and children actually attending is a new direction for the franchise. Not only does it lead to some very funny moments, but it really adds the tension and the stakes near the end of the film. Plus, seeing Jason actually encounter a child is something we don't often get to see in the franchise, as we do when he comes face to face with Nancy. It's a brief but very interesting peek into Jason's psychology, which, as I said when I was talking about part 2, I love. We as the audience are left to wonder what the encounter means. Now it's time to talk about Tommy. For as much as they ignored about part 5, this movie does a good enough job giving us a Tommy that feels consistent with what we've seen out of the character before. This version of Tommy has the mental scars that we saw out of John Shepard's Tommy, but is no longer mentally shattered like that version of the character was. While I enjoy and appreciate the Shepard version of Tommy more than most, this version of the character is given much more to do, and Tom Matthews does a great job of capturing all sides of the character. From the traumatized part that leads to the revival of Jason, to the determined part that is desperate to hunt and kill Jason while attempting to convince others to help him, and even the flirty relationship he has with Megan, Matthews rises to the occasion to give arguably the most memorable and iconic portrayal of the character yet. Now, onto the other lead of this movie, Megan. Jennifer Cook does a pretty solid job in the role, and Megan is one of the more underrated final girls in the franchise, obviously a bit overshadowed by Tom Matthews. Megan is the charming but rebellious daddy's girl who steps up and actually kills Jason in the heat of the moment. While it was Tommy's quest and story, it was Megan who was able to finish it by killing Jason with the boat propeller. As for the others, Sheriff Garris is the hard-ass cop who redeems himself by sacrificing himself for his daughter at the end of the film. The other counselors are more in the background, but have their stand-up moments in their own right. I would say all the characters are at least likable enough. As I've said, the other side characters like the caretaker kids and Deputy Rick add to the comedy of the film. While I wouldn't say that these kills as a whole are the best the franchise has to offer, they are pretty solid and fit the tone of the film well. The standout ones are the one with Nikki's face through the RV, the decapitation through the window where the slippers come off, the caretaker one, and one of the most underrated ones in the franchise with Paula, where we see her struggle with Jason in the cabin, only to come back later to see blood and guts everywhere in the cabin, yet no body. It's one of the most haunting and undeservedly forgotten sequences in the entire franchise. Finally, the soundtrack of this movie is great. Harry Manfredini once again provides an excellent score, but the highlight here really is the music that Alice Cooper provided for the film. Man Behind the Mask will definitely cause you to allow the credits to roll longer than you usually would with these movies. I really had to get nitpicky when thinking of any negative feelings I have towards Jason Lives, but I do have a few very minor gripes. For one, I don't love the gloves they put on Jason in the film. The other complaint I have is that, while I love the final battle on the lake between Tommy and Jason, I do not particularly care for the ending shot of the film with the eye opening under the water. It doesn't ruin the movie or anything, but it does feel just a bit forced. Overall, though, it's hard to say much negative about Jason Lives. It's an absolutely wonderful end to the Tommy Jarvis era of this franchise. From the bold, fresh, and charming tone to the embrace of zombie Jason, to the very likable leading cast and new world building and mythology, Jason Lives is a movie I will always very much enjoy going back to as a hardcore Friday the 13th fan. The minor problems I have with Jason's look and the ending are easily forgivable. I'm going to give Jason Lives a 9.5 out of 10, and I obviously cannot recommend it enough. But that's going to do it for me today, guys. Let me know in the comments below. Do you love Jason Lives as much as I do? Or are you someone who feels that the bold new direction doesn't work for you? Either way, I'm fascinated by what your thoughts are. I'll see you guys later, and take care.